We have seen in these later chapters of 1 Chronicles the great extent to which the author has focused on David as the founder of the temple and the worship of God. Even though David has been denied the right to actually construct it, nevertheless, he has supplied masses of materials for its building. He instructs his son Solomon to build it and encourages him to obey the Lord faithfully, and he organizes the priesthood into its various parts and duties. The impression that the chronicler intends to give us is that for all intents and purposes, David has constructed the entire service of the Lord in Jerusalem, and that all that remains is for Solomon to put all of the pieces together and say go to all the Israelites. This is in significant contrast to the way that 2 Samuel and 1 Kings relates the end of David's life. There we have a picture of sad decline, with the inevitable scheming and bloodshed that occurs around accession to the throne. All of this is not recounted in 1 Chronicles, except for the great sin of counting the people. But it is in resolving this crisis that David decides the place where the temple is to be built. The remainder of David's life in 1 Chronicles is dedicated to preparing for the temple and installing his son Solomon, unopposed, as his successor. Once again, there is unity and joy surrounding these actions. Chapter 22 focused on the location and provisions for construction, along with David's charge to Solomon. Chapter 23 began the organization of the priesthood. In our chapters today, 25 to 26, we are still reading about this organization. Of all the Levites, the Kohathites were in charge of the sanctuary and the holy items. Of these, only the sons of Aaron served at the altar. Because the tabernacle and all the holy items no longer needed transporting and caring for, David reassigns them in chapter 23 to assist their brothers with whatever needs doing in the service. Elsewhere around the temple, Levites are assigned for the worship, maintenance of stores and treasures, and guarding the gates. It is this organization, attributed to David, which produces the 24 courses of the priests, as we see in chapter 24. This is what Luke refers to in chapter 1 of his Gospel, when he describes the father of John the Baptist, Zechariah, as serving in the 8th course, that of Abijah. Note from 1 Chronicles 24:11 that it directly precedes Yeshua. At chapter 25, then, we come to the musicians. The surprising element here is that these musicians prophesy as well. It is debatable whether Chronicles is saying that all these musicians have the role of prophecy, or just the heads of their orders, Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun. Although the chronicler does emphasize their leadership, I think verse 1 is fairly clear that all are envisaged as having a prophetic role. But what kind of prophetic role? Up until now, the prophets we have encountered have either been professional members of a guild or specially chosen by God. There are some, like Nathan and Gad, who serve at court, and others who seem to roam around. And priests could also be consulted for decisions from the Lord about whether to go to war, etc. But we are not told about what sort of prophecy these musicians produced. We have seen a few times already that music accompanied prophecy and was used in preparation for receiving oracles. It seems likely that these prophecies were mainly ones of praise, and I wonder if some of them were perhaps the basis of some psalms. Asaph is given as the author of Psalm 50 and Psalms 73 to 83. The sons of Korah, who are responsible for 10 psalms, are thought to be the sons of Jeduthun. But in 2 Chronicles 20, we will see one of these sons of Asaph break out in a prophecy of encouragement in the middle of the assembly, with an assurance of military success, which is more like a standard prophetic announcement. But this may also just be that the chronicler likes to report instances of ordinary people prophesying, as we have already seen. Anyway, my assumption is that the Levitical musicians, as they played in worship of God, were capable and expected to praise him with inspired speech. But also, because of verse 5, where Haman is called the king's seer, perhaps some of them would give prophetic guidance as well. Chapter 26 describes the courses for the gatekeepers. This was a vital role for two reasons. The first is that temples were renowned for containing treasure. The second is to protect it from impurities. If the temple were to be defiled, it could not operate. The service of God would therefore cease, and there might even be a plague in response, depending on what actually happened. We see in verse 17 that there are extra guards assigned to the eastern gate, as it is the most important. Sanctuaries were entered from the east, like the Garden of Eden. Next described are those responsible for the treasuries. This was comprised of gifts or things won in war. Saul and Joab are listed as having dedicated things without comment on their character. Indeed, Joab is a positive figure in 1 Chronicles. Then, concluding chapter 26, we have the non-cultic roles of some Levites, what we might call secular or bureaucratic work, something like a civil service. Responsibilities included justice and the hearing of cases, probably education, collecting taxes, raising armies, keeping records, and so on. We can see from these last 4 chapters how much the Levites were a part of Israel's life. And this, of course, is precisely what the chronicler wishes to emphasize, along with David's role in organizing it all.